we're gonna do another tier list. So, the previous two Nintendo tier lists were Nintendo home consoles and Nintendo handheld consoles. However, in this video, I'm going to rank all the Nintendo controllers, starting once again going in chronological order. So first off, we have the NES controller. Now, this was the controller that started it all. It had the D-pad, it had the start and select buttons, it had two basic action buttons, and otherwise it was a pretty decent controller. It was also one of the first home console controllers to include a D-pad, which was invented by Nintendo for the Donkey Kong Game & Watch. So, yep, it's a pretty good device. However, it's not the most complex, as it doesn't have any buttons or motion controls. So I'm going to put this at the top of A tier. Next off we have the NES Zapper. Now this was an interesting little controller. It was pretty much the first of its kind, actually. And it was also pretty much a predecessor to the Wii Remote's pointing feature, albeit on the original hardware not having an indicator, at least from what I've seen. So, yeah, it's a predecessor to the Wii Remote. I'm going to go ahead and put it into A tier. Also, just so you know, I'm going to go ahead and put it in A tier just behind the NES controller. It's not as good of a controller as the NES controller, as it only has one button and a pointing feature, but it's still a good controller. Also, just so you know, we're not going to be covering like any classic controllers. Like, we are going to cover the Wii Classic controllers, but not like the Switch Online ones. So, the last controller for the NES we have is this thing. Now, you may not know why this even exists, but yeah, it's pretty bad. So, this is the Power Glove, and I do like the concept, but only a few NES games worked with it, and it really had no use. So, this controller is going to go to F tier. Barely going into F tier, because I like the concept, but it just wasn't pulled off very well. The next controller we have on this tier list is the Super Nintendo controller. Now, while it wasn't a lot of people's 90s nostalgia, as pretty much everybody I know that lived in the 90s owned a Sega Genesis, this actually created the 4-button pattern that revolutionized the gaming industry. Because nowadays you don't just see the 2-button pattern that was on the original NES controller. You see the 4-button pattern, and you see it everywhere. And so thanks to the 4-button pattern, it's gonna go into S tier, because not only did it have 4 buttons we know and love today, but it also has the 2 shoulder buttons, which although in many modern controllers that got replaced with 4 shoulder buttons, still, you can't argue that the two shoulder buttons are pretty revolutionary. So next up, and for our last controller we're going to be reviewing for the SNES, is the SNES Super Scope. It was released, I don't know when, somewhere after 1992, I think, but yeah. This was only used for a few games, but it was only used for a couple games, but each of those games were pretty good. There was that one game where you were riding Yoshi as Mario, and you used the Super Scope to shoot all the enemies, but it wasn't that bad. So, yeah, once again, the Super Scope, and also the other Super Scope game is Super Scope 6, which I've never played or seen before, but it's still gonna go into A tier. The reason it's below the original NES Zapper is because it has less games that it works with. So next up on the list, we have the Nintendo 64 controller. This is the only controller officially released by Nintendo that was released for the Nintendo 64. All the other controllers were pretty much just accessories. They weren't actually controllers. But, yeah, the Nintendo 64 controller is pretty interesting, and while many people do like to make fun of it for the fact that only three-handed people can play it, it's still pretty cool, because, actually that's not what it's intended for. It's intended for one player to, it's intended for one hand to stay on the stick, and the other it's intended for the left hand to be on the stick and the right hand to be on the buttons. Oh, or it can also be used for 2D games. Your left hand goes on the D-pad and the right goes on the buttons. Or for certain puzzle games, left hand on the D-pad, right on the thumbstick. So yeah, there are a variety of ways to use this thing, but the only drawback I see is that it only has 2 buttons. The C buttons count, but still, I don't really understand. This controller confuses me, so I'm just gonna put it in S tier. Also, it did introduce the thumbstick, although it wasn't actually the first controller to have a thumbstick ever. That record belongs to the DualShock on the PlayStation 1. So, yeah. So the next controller is the GameCube controller. Now, this controller is pretty interesting. It has a C stick, which while it does remind me of the C buttons on the N64 controller, it's a stick. So yeah. It also has 4 buttons like the Super Nintendo controller. However, unlike the Super Nintendo controller, these buttons are arranged kind of weirdly. There's also a D-pad. The D-pad's also not great. But I love the stick pattern. And also, those triggers are just so deep. Oh, the rumble. And oh, who could forget the rumble? Yes. Sure, I may not have played that much Smash Bros. Melee because my GameCube's broken. But, oh, this controller's amazing. I'm going to put it in S tier above the Nintendo 64 controller. This controller is just, yes, it is. Yes, the GameCube's controller is the best. In fact, I'm going to put it above the Super Nintendo controller as well. Yeah, Smash Bros. Players are especially fond of the GameCube controller. But how could we mention the GameCube controller without mentioning the Wavebird? This was kind of like a different variant of the original rather than a completely new controller. However, it really does stand out from all the other GameCube controllers, as unlike the original, this one is wireless, hence the name Wavebird. I need to put it higher than the GameCube controller, because although it is a bit bulkier than the GameCube controller, it's still pretty good. It's wireless. And now for the Wii. Starting with the Wii remote. Now, this little guy was pretty interesting. It definitely did stand out from controllers from competitor consoles like the DualShock 3 and the Xbox 360 gamepad. Really, it was the best. Really, it was really cool. It was a really cool controller. This couldn't actually be considered a gamepad. Not to mention it has that point feature which came from its grandpa, the Super Scope, and its great grandpa, the NES Zapper. Really, I need to rate this higher. And also there was a port on the bottom that allowed you to attach accessories like the Wii Motion Plus brick and the nunchuck and a couple other controllers that I'll mention. So yeah, this really does beat these other controllers. It really does beat these other controllers. Thus, I have to put it up here in S tier. Sorry, GameCube controllers. But the Wii Remote allows you to attach a bunch of new accessories, such as the classic controller. Yep, that's right. Nintendo finally, for once, made a normal controller. Yeah, this controller, it wasn't actually that normal, as it doesn't have any grips, but still, you obviously have to rate this pretty high. Of course, you can't rate it above the Wii Remote, as the Wii Remote's needed to use this controller, but it still goes to S tier, right? And that other controller with grips I was talking about, yeah, obviously it's going to go higher than the original. So yeah, I'm really needing to move around things in S tier. This is awkward. Okie dokie. So, now that we're done with all the S tier controllers, for now, we're gonna have to go to one that's not as great. The Wii Balance Board. Yeah, for once, it didn't actually need the Wii Remote to attach, as you need to hold the Wii Remote in your hand at the same time. And why would you want a long cord? Thus, this was an independent controller, completely independent from the Wii Remote. Now, I will give it points for not needing the Wii Remote to attach, but this goofy thing, it was really only used for a few games. Like, it was only used for Wii Fit, Wii Fit Plus, later on the Wii U, Wii Fit U, and other variety, and only a few other fitness games on the Wii and Wii U. So really, it didn't have a big game library. But at the same time, I can't make it go all the way down to F tier with the Power Glove, because it's not that bad. So I'm just gonna rate it in C tier. It didn't have a lot of games, and it wasn't quite as revolutionary as the Super Scope and the NES Zapper. So, yep, time to move on to the Wii U. So, the first controller for the Wii U is the Wii U gamepad. Yep, if you own a Wii U, you probably know this all too well. You might even call it one of the highlights of the system. Yeah, advantages, it was basically a Wii Classic controller, only it didn't need to get connected to a Wii remote, obviously, because that was sold separately. And also, it was basic. It had a touch screen. A camera, an IR sensor, a home button of its own. Actually, no, an IR sensor, the camera, the TV button, the power button so you can power on and off your console using the Wii U gamepad, the TV button, the mic, and the highlight of the Wii U gamepad, the screen. Yep, it had a built-in touch screen, which meant you could basically play your Wii U like a DS. In fact, Nintendo even highlighted that fact by adding DS games to Virtual Console on the Wii U. Huh, isn't that interesting? The only downside about the Wii U gamepad is that you can only connect one to your system. You can only connect one gamepad per system. So really it didn't. So that meant not everybody could get their own screen. But come on, it's the Wii U gamepad. Out of the way, other controllers. We gotta put this at the top of S tier. It's pretty much a king of all controllers. Yeah. Sorry, Wii Remote. Not to mention the Wii U gamepad had built-in gyro. Yeah. And also it has rumble that to me is a little more It has rumble that to me is not as satisfying as the GameCube, but still, it's pretty cool. So next we have the Wii Classic controller. Basically the Wii U gamepad, but it got it got reverse engineered back to a Wii Pro controller. But at least it's wireless without even needing to plug it into the Wii remote. And not to mention, you can use it to power off your console. Which, yeah. However, the only advantage is you can't even wirelessly use it in conjunction with the Wii remote to use it on Wii software. So, yeah, in total, was this controller useless? Nuh-uh. But was this controller completely useless? Nuh-uh. But is it better than the Wii Classic controller? Not really. I mean bonus points for not needing to plug into a Wii remote or needing to connect to the Wii U gamepad to the Wii U in a weird way. But yeah, it's going just above the original Classic controller. So after that, we have the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. Now these Joy-Cons, while people do like to hate on Joy-Cons, I personally kind of like them. I mean, sure, they're not as good as a Split Pad Pro, but you can't even use the Split Pad Pro in handheld mode. In TV mode, unless you have a custom grip. So, yeah, the Joy-Cons immediately beat the Split Pad Pro. I mean, I forgot to put that on there, but... So, yeah. Sorry, Wii Remote, but you're getting beat by another controller. Not to mention you can do a variety of things with the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch. Like, you could put your Switch in tabletop mode with the comfort, with or without the comfort grip. You can use them. You can use the weird little individual grip thingies with the wrist straps to use motion controls. You can use gyro controls, of course only in the right Joy-Con usually. You can use them individually. You can use gyro controls to point at the screen. On the right Joy-Con it has an IR sensor, and the list just goes on. Now after that we have the... Oh, you again. So, yeah, the Switch Pro controller. And, I don't know what to say about this. I mean, it's okay, but I mean, I'm not even sure about this controller. I'm not sure where to put it. So, it's basically like a, Wii U Pro controller. So, like, it's basically like a Wii U Pro controller. So, like, basically a Wii U gamepad on Switch, but with the touchscreen and a bunch of other unique features removed. So, yeah. Not going too well so far, Switch Pro controller. However, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, it just reminds me of a controller like the Xbox controller. Not to mention you can get a weighted one. And not to mention you can even get a Switch Pro controller in the form of basically a wireless GameCube controller with the exact buttons. Thus, it's not gonna rate too high. I'm not even sure where to put this. Above the Wii U Pro controller and below it. How do I put them together, though? I mean, it's okay, but I'm gonna put it just above the Wii U Pro controller. So yeah, that concludes my tier list of Nintendo controllers. So if you liked the video and you want to see some more tier lists like this, or maybe even PlayStation and Xbox tier lists, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And I'll see you later. Bye.